At CES 2026, Intel announced their Panther Lake 300 series CPU and the B390 uh, onboard graphics for the GPU. They had an event called the ARC Zone. So for 20 minutes, they were giving us like a presentation about the new graphic and the new CPU. And then they would let us for an hour 15, benchmark any game we wanted and capture any footage we want from this laptop that came with the 388H top of the line Core 9 CPU and the B390 GPU. The only limitation was that no synthetic benchmark like Cinebench or 3D Mark, but the first of those laptops should come by the end of the month, so we won't have to wait long to see the performance. So they would give us a laptop, a gaming mouse, and everything, and said you can capture anything you want. So they install a bunch of game, but nothing stopped you to bring your own game if you wanted, and also to use the tools that you want. So they had Present Mount that like is Intel open source tool for monitoring that was already on the machine. So what I did is that first I play a little of Cyberpunk 2077, and then I asked them if we could run a game benchmark, and they say any benchmark in game is fine. And you can see there because there was a lot of other people. PC Gamer was there, Jake, formerly from LTT, was there. So you had a lot outlet, and we were kind of like all running the same three things at the beginning: Shadow of the Tomb Raider benchmark, Cyberpunk 2077 benchmark, and Monster Hunter World the benchmark, but that's some issue with this one. So at the beginning to see the performance.
You can see my setup here. I forgot to bring my external drive at the hotel, so I decided to just capture the screen with my Osmo Pocket 3 and take quick notes for the benchmark instead of having CSV or files. It worked okay for that quick session. Let's talk about the spec of the computer first. You can see that it's the top of the line Core Ultra X9 388H with 32 gig of RAM. There was no branding on the Lenovo laptop, so it's unclear if it's a production unit or it's just a demo unit they built for this presentation. It's a little tough to read here, but you can see that you have a 16 core, 16 thread CPU that can go to up to 5.1 gigahertz with 18 meg of cache and 50 tops for the AI. In 3 generation, Intel claim up to 2.8 power rejection for efficiency of those laptops. So it's going to be interesting to see battery life. They're quoting up to 27 hours of battery life if you just do Netflix watching versus 17 hours for productivity benchmark suit and up to 9 hours if you do a 3 versus 3 team with FX. So it should be last you all day, but it's going to be interesting to see how long you can get battery life for it. They're also showing way more performance versus the Qualcomm 84-100 CPU. I have the 80-100, so it should be even better performance for productivity here. But of course, this is manufacturer claims, so we'll need to test one of those laptops when they release. I already asked Intel about that. Now, more interestingly, it's come with their ARC B390 and integrated graphics, which has 12 XC core and up to 120 tops for AI. So that's kind of impressive stats for integrated graphic. And to give you an idea, the B580 has 20 XC core. So it's more than half there. So for an integrated graphic, you should get really good performance if it's well optimized. Now they show a lot of performance gain versus the previous generation at 45 watt sustain. But of course, we're gonna need to test some of the game, and this is what I did next. Now, they also released XCSS3 with it, but it will depend when the game are starting to support it. They're claiming better lighting, sharper visual, and more smoothness. So that's going to be interesting when games start to implement it. And they show you here Cyberpunk with 4x frame gen getting to 146 versus 85 with the previous generation. But of course, frame gen add latency, so that's going to be interesting to see in a shooter how it's going to play out. They had a bunch of game installed, but of course, first thing I did is to go to Cyberpunk 2077. There was no save file, so I created a new game with a new character, and then started the game just to see how it would play. It was in 2800 by 1800, so the native resolution of the screen, and I was getting between 35 to 40 frame. So it's impressive at that resolution, but of course, after that, I decided to play with the settings just to see. Ray tracing was on though, so I lowered the setting to medium with XCSS, and then I jumped to 55 to 65 frame a second, but still in the introduction. Then after playing a little the game and driving mostly in the desert, I decided to run the benchmark. You can see here that we're getting 54 FPS average for the setting I had put before. Then I switched to ray tracing low and rerun the bench, and we're getting an average of 36 frame a second. I decided to check then Monster Hunter Wild. The game was installed, the demo, but the problem is that the shader were not compiled, so it took like 15 minutes to compile the shader. I could have canceled it, but because the fans were getting loud, I decided to let it run and see what kind of temps and like CPU and FPS it would give while doing like the compilation. I mean, the FPS while compiling the shader doesn't really matters, but you can see all the stats here on the screen. The CPU and GPU utilization was around 73% each, but in present mon, I could not get the temperature reading correctly. The demo was still using XCSS 1.3 and activated frame gen just to see how it went after it compiled the shader for 15 minutes. So I just ran one test because I wanted to test out the game and let it run as you can see here. We get to an average of 43 FPS, and it would say change recommended. So of course I could have tried another upscaler and lower the resolution or things like that. But that was just a quick test, and like I said, this game is so poorly optimized that there's a lot of like core issue with the game. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was next. By default, someone had left it at the lowest setting, but the native resolution of 2800 by 1800. So I got an average of 66, but you can see a big part of like the game is running over like 100 FPS. So I didn't re-benchmark it, but we can clearly get this game running super well, and that was impressive. I reran the benchmark at highest quality, and the game was still doing super good. But I didn't capture that run on my Osmo Pocket 3. Then I switched to Doom the Dark Age and just start playing the introduction of the game. At the beginning, I was getting like an average of like 28 to 30 FPS, but it was at the native resolution, so I lowered the resolution to 1440p. The game didn't let me lower the resolution lower though. So then I switched to FSR and got in the highest at 45 to 50 frame a second. I'm sure with tuning and lower the resolution, though you could get to a 60 to 90 FPS easily, but it was the end of the session and I didn't have a lot of time left. After that in the booth, they had a demo unit of the MSI Claw 8. So I play a little with it at Expedition 33. And I'm really curious for the generation of these NL using the Core 300 series from Intel. Sorry for the shaking while I'm playing. I then moved to the Intel Tech Showcase, which was basically Intel booth for CES. On my left, there was like a gaming section with multiple games to try with the B390. But I talked to the person there, and because I was just coming from the Intel ARC zone, he said it's basically what you would have tested and longer over the ARC zone. So, but we still had a good chat about the new capability of the new graphic card. So I appreciate my time there. They're showing the new onboard chipset with Wi-Fi 7. So then we'll talk about what kind of speed we had because I just redid my network with Wi-Fi 7. And also there was a boot for TP-Link that was just showing Wi-Fi 8. So we're kind of laughing about that, saying like no one will move to Wi-Fi 7 if 8 is already out. There was also a robot and AI section. You could interact with the robot, but I mostly moved to the other section. We had a lot of new laptops showing up from their other partners. So I cannot wait to test one. And I appreciate my time there. It was really a no pressure environment. Just go benchmark what you want and report on it if you feel like.
So, what do I thought of the ARC Zone benchmarking session? Well, first I booked it very late, so I appreciate that Intel accommodated me to be able to test it, and I appreciate the chance to test the high-end laptop and the GPU before the product get released. I think the general feeling on the floor, at least during my session, is that people were impressed with the onboard graphics. And this is where it's getting super interesting for me because with my ROG Ally first generation, before you could see that the golden rule for onboard graphic for the last 20 years were like onboard graphics sucks and just avoid it in any laptop. But like the ROG Ally prove it with a good SoC, now you can get very good onboard graphic. I'm actually curious to see this GPU. I know it's the Core 9 CPU, so probably not this one, but I'm actually so curious to see the new generation, like the MSI Claw, that will use the 300 generation for the CPU because you clearly like getting good graphics. Sometimes I would leave the 2000 by 1800 resolution and lower it if you need, but on 1080p or 1480p resolution, you would get amazing graphic for it. So I'm curious what kind of battery life and graphic you would get with that. And those laptops should be out by the end of the month, at least the first one. So we shouldn't have to wait too long to see that. Of course, because we didn't have a previous generation laptop or any synthetic benchmark, we are not necessarily like having a full picture and like a full review. So this is why it's more like a preview because you need to compare it between other laptop or at least just as the full performance, battery life, and things like that to see where you get. But like I said, the general feeling was like, oh, this is impressive because every game that I run, worst case, I would lower the resolution a little for Cyberpunk, and it's like, oh, I'm getting 80 frames second now on this game, so I think it's gonna be a very good chips for that. But of course, we'll need to test it more when it's get released to get the full picture. But I appreciate my first preview with it because I was like, oh, this is a very interesting product that I definitely need to investigate more. Thanks for watching.